Lesson 1 is about research strategies. A research strategy is a plan with steps on doing research. Information is changing all the time, new things are published, breakthroughs and discoveries are made, the tools with which we access the information changes, goes out of style, whatever. However, the process and strategies we use to hunt down this information does not change. The 7 steps in this lesson will help you not only in this class, but with all your future research. For example, your professor says, okay, give me an argument paper, 5 pages, due in 2 weeks. No, by the way, I want 4 to 6 academic resources cited to prove your case. What do you do now? Well, you follow the basic steps of research. Step 1 is to select a research topic. If you've already got an idea, that's great. Or if your professor has a list of approved topics, you can skip this section. This page has some links of where you can get ideas of things that you might want to write about. The library's research paper guide, that's an outside link. It'll take us to the library website. And in this, you have a basic research paper guide, how to write a research paper. The library has multiple types of these guides. You can see by subject in the left-hand side here. American history, art history, subject-specific guides that can tell you which type of resources are good for art history, which are good for finance, financial aid, graphic design. So the second tab is working with topics. So it has a couple outside links here on an idea generator, the Times topics from the New York Times, a little bit here on whether you should expand or narrow your topic, which we will also learn shortly. The second suggestion is a paperback book. This is kind of old. I'm going to suggest that you don't use this in class, but if you are in the Pensacola or Warrington campus library and you want to kind of browse through a real paper book, you can go ahead and look this up. The next 2 sites, Hot Paper Topics, research paper, and argument topics from UCF, are just lists of topics. So if we visit the first link, for example, there are a bunch of topics and also sources to help you with those. We've got abortion, the death penalty, drug use in sports, hot topics here. Give us another list. Terrorism, sustainability, obesity, all things like that, where you can get a general idea of something that you want to write about, something that sparks your interest. The second link, the research paper and argument topics from the University Writing Center. We have some general categories up here, media issues, environmental issues, and then if we scroll down a little further, it will specify what type of questions you could ask more narrowly to get an idea. Gender and sexuality, is healthcare for women underfunded? Should the Equal Rights Amendment be revived and made part of the Constitution? Stuff like that. And then the last thing that you can do is use a database to find your topic. These 3 are specifically argument databases, CQ Researcher, issues and controversies, opposing viewpoints. I am going to show you opposing viewpoints quickly. You don't know how to use these databases yet, but you'll learn in a later lesson. So if you click on the opposing viewpoints, it will open up a page where you at home will have to log in. I go straight there because I'm in the library. You will log in with your student ID and the last 4 of your social. So on the main page here, we have some sliders giving you current events, things that you might want to write about. Gloria Steinem, Egyptian activists, things that are happening in the news currently, racial hazing at San Jose State, that type of thing. You can scroll down further and see the specific categories: energy and environmentalism, law and politics. You can click on any one of them under the View All button next to the words to see a gigantic list of all the different types of issues. Junk food. We have got creationism, gun control, that's a really popular one. Homeschooling in the past, that's been really popular too. Texting while driving, all kinds of different things. The Tea Party in this category that might spur something in you to find a general topic that you can write about. So after you go kind of browse around, you want to select your topic, your main subject that you're going to write about. It can be very broad. So homeschooling, gun control, these are 2 broad things that I might be looking at, that I might feel like I want to write my paper about, or do my persuasive speech or whatever I've got coming up. Step 2 is focus your topic. You have an idea, you may not know a lot to begin with about that idea. To get a more thorough idea, you can use a general resource such as an encyclopedia to gain a basic understanding. So these encyclopedias are ones that we have access to through the library, and they're online. We can go to any one of them and visit one of our subjects. If we're debating between homeschooling and gun control, we can go into encyclopedias and kind of narrow down our topic, see what we should focus on specifically, what's out there. So here I am in the Gale Virtual Reference Library. So I'm going to go ahead and type gun control and see what I've got. The first thing here is the Encyclopedia of the American Constitution. So I can click on gun control here and I'll get an overview of the issues. This is relating to the Second Amendment, the Bill of Rights, all sorts of issues here that I can consider for my paper. It gives me a more specific focus as well, because from this I could focus on the legality in America of gun control versus, you know, just the broad issue of gun control, morality, or whether people are getting hurt, the crime statistics, anything like that. This can help me narrow specifically to like the Second Amendment and the American government, so I'm not looking at other governments, the legality of the issue. And you can use any one of those encyclopedias to really help you focus your topic, see what, you know, a little more about it if you don't know anything about it to begin with. Once you've got the main topic picked out, you can ask yourself some of these questions to narrow it down. What dates are important to the topic? If you're doing apartheid, for example, you're looking into something historical, so you want to look at that then. Specific places are important to the topic. We just said gun control. I want to narrow that down to American gun control. You might want to do a different country. Important events related to the topic. So if I wanted to narrow further, I could consider Sandy Hook or something like that has happened in the news recently. What people, groups, or organizations have made a significant contribution or have been involved in some way with the topic. What subject or discipline is the topic a part of? Are there any conflicting views or controversies surrounding the topic? So you always want to consider the opposing point of view when you're doing a persuasive paper. You can go into, on the first step, the CQ researcher issues and controversies and opposing viewpoints, and you can get more of an idea there as well, to kind of define your topic to a more specific, to really narrow your topic to a more specific thing, because gun control is too broad. I need to really narrow that down, you know, in concern to the legality of it in America, or whether it causes violent crime, if gun control laws were stricter, if perhaps people with mental illness should not be allowed to purchase them, something more specific than I've got. I really need to focus that down. So here's an example of focusing your topic. If we went through the gun control one a little bit, so if we've got homeschooling, this is our main subject. Some of the more specific focuses could be, does homeschooling isolate children socially? Should homeschooling parents be required to be certified in the subjects they teach? Should public schools offer extracurricular activities for homeschooled children? After you've got it more specifically narrowed, you can state your topic as a working thesis. So here's an example of some topics stated as a thesis. Does homeschooling isolate children socially? Homeschooling children have the opportunity to socialize in many ways outside the formal school education. Organized sports, church, and other clubs provide a means to interact with their peers. So you notice that this is stated in a sentence very specifically, and also it takes a stance. It says homeschooling children have the opportunity to socialize, so that's important about your thesis. Should the government make new legislation regarding gun control? Although the Second Amendment is one of our legal rights, the government still has the opportunity to put stricter laws in place regarding gun obtainment and control, and in doing so would lessen violent crime. This addresses the power of the government and how it relates to our lives, and the stance is that they should be more involved, right? After you have done that, you've really narrowed down your topic, focused specifically, and then you're going to go straight to that research starter worksheet and write your thesis down. After that, you need to separate the thesis into concepts. You want to look at the bare bones of the thesis. If it could just be defined by words, what words would you use to define it? So for this one, although the Second Amendment is one of our legal rights, the government still has the opportunity to put stricter laws in place regarding containment and control, and doing so would lessen violent crime. So what are the main concepts in this thesis? I want to pull them out and look at them specifically. What can I narrow down this whole lovely sentence into? So I would say we've got the Second Amendment, government, laws, and violent crime are my different areas. I think those are all the different things that really sum up my thesis well. And now I can take those words and write them on my research keyword worksheet. So before your topic, sentence, research question, thesis, your thesis is really the main thing that should go on this sentence right here, and then you can cross off the non-important words and really take out the meat of your thesis, and you're going to write them down on the keyword blanks below. Now you might have 2 concepts, just 2, or you might have 4 or 5. You don't have to have 3. It's not a requirement. It's just, the way this worksheet is set up. So for the one that I was talking about, although it's the Second Amendment one that we just went through, Second Amendment is going to be written here. Government, laws, and violent crime would be another category over here that I need to brainstorm for. I also might be able to put laws in connection with Second Amendment in this first row. It's really up to you. Research is a process, so that's going to change. As you find more sources, you're going to have to alter your keywords. You'll really need to keep going and change things as you research. That's just part of the process. So to find the keywords, we separated them out from our thesis, and now we need some synonyms to go with our keyword worksheet. And this is going to help make our search statement or search string. The search statement is just the way we combine all these different synonyms. So once we get those keywords, the Second Amendment, guns, law, and violent crime, we want to brainstorm the synonyms for them. And the reason we do this is because if you're writing a persuasive paper especially, you want to get all the different ways sources are listed. So if I'm researching global warming, I need to have the word climate change in there too, so I can really get both sides of the issue and I can get all the information available on my topic. There's collegiate thesaurus, that's just thesaurus.com or thesaurus.com, or I can Google what are synonyms for global warming, what are synonyms for the law, what are synonyms for guns, and I can use those to really find some alternate terms that I can use. The ones that I've come up with here: Second Amendment, right to bear arms; Second Amendment, Amendment 2. So you want to put different ways of not only related terms like the right to bear arms relates to the Second Amendment, but you also want to write the same thing different ways. The Second Amendment might not be there, but the Second Amendment with the 2, the numerical version, might be there, or the way it's listed in the primary source in the Constitution might be written like this with the Roman numerals. Guns, firearms, handguns, pistol, revolver, these are all, kind of synonyms for guns that the article might mention. It might not have the word gun, but it might be referring to a pistol or a revolver. Law, legal, illegal, like I said, that might go with Second Amendment. You could possibly put it there. But you've got legal as well as illegal to just kind of capture the different venues there. Violent crime, violence crime, murder, and armed robbery. So in this example, I picked the word apart, and I also have examples of violent crimes, so that might help me in my article search as well. And what I mean by it might help me in the article search is to have all the information on a particular topic, you need to cover multiple avenues. For example, if you're writing an argument paper for Comp 2 and your topic is global warming, you want to research both sides of the issue so you're really persuasive. Normally, global warming is used by those who believe it is occurring, while climate change is used by those who don't. To get both sides, you need to search both terms. So we have a bunch of different terms that we're searching so we can get the most and the best information. And research is a process, so you'll just be brainstorming these terms on your keyword worksheet. Some of them might not work. You want to get rid of them. Some of them, you might want to add in later. You see articles mentioning the same word over and over, like firearm. If you hadn't had that listed before, you're like, that's one of the keywords. And you can kind of work it out on your keyword worksheet. So now that we came up with all those keywords, what do we do with them? How do they go together? Well, they go together in what's called a search statement or a search string. A search string is what goes into the box when you're searching, like in Google or in the catalog to look for books, in a database to look for articles. You are not going to take your thesis and type the whole sentence into the box. You may be able to do that in Google, how tall is Danny DeVito, and it might work, but I don't want you to do that anymore, and especially not in this class. It's one of my pet peeves. So we are going to take those keywords that we just came up with and combine them together into a search string. And we are going to do that using Boolean operators, phrase searching, and truncation. So Boolean operators, that's what I've got on my screen up here, and you may remember this from when you were in grade school, Venn diagrams. You can see OR is on the outside here. It's not included in either circle, and is what overlaps in both of them. So when I'm teaching this in person, what I like to have people do is stand up, and I have them stand up if they have brown hair or blue eyes, and that's usually most of the class. And then I ask them to stay standing if they have brown hair and blue eyes, using the and. And at this point, only, a couple people are standing. It significantly reduced the number of results we have because I made them meet more qualifications. They have to have both things. So OR gives you more results. We've got a choice there between the two different things. It can meet either qualification, and gives us less results because it has to meet both qualifications. And if you don't understand that, there's a little tutorial link below that you can enter, and it's a good tutorial from Colorado State. It takes you through Boolean operators. I suggest that you do that. Not, of course, is just something that doesn't include either and or. For example, if you were looking at stuff for the country China, but plates kept coming up in your search, you can use not to exclude that from the results. I can say I'm looking for China, and then I can say not plates, and that will get rid of all the results that mention plates. Okay? So these Boolean operators are what are used in database searches, usually through the library. We're going to learn something different for Google, so make sure that you know these are not what you're going to use for Google. When you're putting together your search string, you are going to use at least 2 Boolean operators most likely, because you have so many complex ideas for your big topic. The thesis statement, for example, automobile airbags are not safe for children, might come to the search statement, automobiles and airbags and children and safety. So that's and or not. The next step in creating a search statement, or one of the other components that you need to learn in creating a search statement, is nesting. Nesting is indicated by parentheses, and it keeps the words together. The search terms and Boolean operators included inside the parentheses will be searched first, and then the terms and operators outside the parentheses will be searched after that. So it keeps them kind of together. We have a choice between global warming or climate change. This is kind of like the FOIL method if you learned in school. Parentheses are done first. So let's learn how that goes all together in our research process using the keywords that we've already developed. So here we go. From our example, Second Amendment or right to bear arms or Second Amendment or Amendment 2, these are all the synonyms from that same concept or the related terms that we have all hugged together in parentheses, nested together, and they have or between them. And that's because those are the same concept, and we're letting the search engine choose between all those different things. Next we have and, because this is another whole concept that we want to include. It's important to our thesis. So now we have guns or firearms or handguns or pistol or revolver, and those have ors between them because of the different choices for the same concept, and they're all hugged together in that nest. The same thing for the 2 below. We have and, our next concept, law or legal or illegal, and our next concept, violent crime or violence or crime or murder or armed robbery, all nested together. And I want you to notice that I'm using capitals for Boolean operators. I'd like you to do that as well. Another component of creating a search statement is to use phrase searching, and it's indicated by quotes. You are going to use phrase searching when you have 2 or more words that you want to keep together in a little hug. It's kind of like nesting, but you're going to use it on individual words instead of the whole concept. You never want to use it on one word. However, on a phrase, global warming, for example, you're going to have quotes around that so you can keep it together in a little hug. So this way we won't get results when we're searching like Warming the hearts of children is a global initiative. The words separated when I searched it without quotes, and I got something like that, whereas opposed to if I put the quotes around it, they must stay in order. Another component of creating a search statement is truncation. Truncation allows you to put an asterisk at the stem of the word, and it will give you all the alternate endings that are associated with that word. This example, I have teen, and then it's truncated right at the root, teen right there, with the asterisk, and then it gives me all the alternate endings that would occur after the stem of teen. So I have teens, teenager, teenagers, teenaged, teensy, and teeny. It gives me all the different opportunities there. And I have another tutorial from Colorado State here if you want to click to get that. In another example, if I wanted to truncate bike, I could go BIK with an asterisk, giving me bikers, biking, biker, bike. And that's just an example for biking. You probably wouldn't want to use that one because it's a really short word, and if you get too short with the stems of your words when you're truncating, it usually doesn't work out very well. It'll bring back too many results. You also don't want to use the asterisk for just plurals. Typically, Academic Search Complete and most databases will look for plurals, or you can just use an or. I don't like you to use truncation if you're just searching for plurals, so make sure that you get close enough to the stem of the word where you can search a bunch of different endings. So field searching. When we're looking up information, an article, book, or document, it's not just thrown into the computer willy-nilly. It's separated into fields so we can search it easier. Fields are kind of like different categories that information falls into. The title of the book or article is in a field, the author is in a different field, the subject is in a separate field, etc. When you actually do a keyword search, you search all the fields of the document. That's what keyword means. It searches every field. For example, if I search Bill Clinton as a keyword, the phrase Bill Clinton can show up in the author field, the title field, or the subject field. It can show up in all those different places. If I was specifically looking for articles or books written by Bill Clinton, I could change my keyword search to limit to just the author field. And this way, I would get better results. So if I'm looking for Bill Clinton's autobiography, My Life, I can go ahead and select just author for my keyword search, and that way I won't get books about him or with his name in the title that aren't written by him. This is a screenshot from Academic Search Complete, which is a database that we will be learning to use shortly, and I've highlighted the different fields that you can see when you're looking in the database. It's got an abstract, which is just a short summary of the document, subject terms, article type, authors, word count, and so when we do a keyword search, it searches all these different things. There's a drop-down menu when you're searching these things, and keyword is automatically selected. If you don't change anything, it'll search every field. If you use the drop-down menu, you can change to things like author, source, subject term to really narrow your search down and get more results if you know what you're searching for. As I mentioned before, research is a process. It's not a one-shot deal. Sometimes your first attempt will not give you good results. You may either find too much stuff or not enough information or not helpful information. If that happens, you're going to have to change or redesign your topic question or your search statement. One of the most common problems when you're researching is results that are too broad or unrelated. In that case, you'll have to limit your search results. You can do certain things to limit your search results, and they are choose a narrower category of major topic, use the AND Boolean operator to add relevant terms to the search, use the NOT Boolean operator to eliminate terms from the search, search one or more words in the title field as opposed to searching throughout the full text of the document, use phrase searching to define your search terms, or use a vocabulary that is more specific. If you've got the opposite problem, too few sources on your topic, you want to expand or broaden your search. You can pick a broader topic, you can combine alike terms with Boolean operators, or remember, or gives you more results, it rhymes. You can use wildcards or truncation to retrieve alternate spellings or the ends of root words. You can use more general vocabulary. You can use vocabulary more appropriate to your discipline. You can take out one of the whole concepts that you came up with. So in my case, I could take out the legal part of the fourth component of my search on that keyword worksheet. I could just strike one of the whole concepts. So now that we've gone through coming up with our keywords after we picked our topic and we created our search string with all the booleans and the truncation, the phrase searching and nesting, we need to decide which sources to search. Often your professor will require certain types of sources to be used, one book, one website, 3 articles, etc. Or you will probably be required to use scholarly or peer-reviewed works in addition to popular sources like Time Magazine or New Yorker or something like that. Depending on your project or what discipline you're in, primary sources may be necessary, or the topic that you're looking at may be something where you need current information or historical information like an old census or something like that. Let's look at that first category there, scholarly versus popular. Scholarly resources are very important for academic work, especially when you're in college. Scholarly resources are what you really want to use. Scholarly information presents original research findings and has much more detail and a better understanding of the topic than a popular or general interest publication. Consider an article on alcoholism in the American Journal of Psychology versus the piece in Time Magazine. The American Journal of Psychology is going to have professional psychologists who wrote it, people who really study and know medicine and disease, versus Time Magazine is going to be a journalist or someone who is sent out into the field to write the piece, and they might not be as much of an expert. They definitely won't be as much of an expert. I've got a little chart here for you so you can kind of tell what areas you want to look at when you're trying to determine whether your source is scholarly or popular. A couple of the things, I'm not going to read these all to you, but you might want to consider if there's advertisements on the page, if the source cites other sources, who the audience is, like Wikipedia is for general readers, it's not specifically for scholars. Even though they do have some documentation, the language that it's written in, something that appeals to your audience that's really general, is not going to have the same specialized terms that scholars use. The content is going to be really in-depth, and it will probably be sponsored by a university or peer-reviewed in some way. And of course the authors are going to be professionals, someone with degrees or experts. Another thing you might consider when deciding which sources to search are primary versus secondary sources. Primary sources take different forms depending on the discipline. In literature, a primary source is the novel, short story, poem, etc. Primary sources include laws, letters, oral histories, diaries, newspaper articles, or events. In science, primary sources are reports of the original research. Primary sources tend to stand on their own and be first-hand observations of an event. A secondary source is one in which someone analyzes, critiques, reviews, or explains a primary source. They are often authored by people who were not present when the event occurred. Many are written by scholars who have carefully studied the primary source and have drawn their own conclusions. One type of source here, primary or secondary, is not necessarily better than another type of source, but sometimes in a history class or something like that, you'll have to study a primary source. Or if you're doing a literature critique, your professor might want you to only look at that story versus the secondary source, what other people have said about it. And there's some examples here. The autobiography of Charles Darwin. Obviously, Charles Darwin was present for his own life versus Charles Darwin, a short biography. The author of this might have written it after Charles Darwin had already died. Obviously, he was not present for every moment of Charles Darwin's life. The Declaration of Independence versus a user's guide to the Declaration of Independence. Obviously, no one writing something now as a scholar of the Declaration of Independence was going to be around during the signing, but they do have access to the Declaration of Independence now, so they can study it and how it has affected our government and stuff like that. Plato's Republic versus Greek philosophy. Plato, that's a criticism of Plato, kind of explaining about Plato's philosophy and an overview. Current versus historical sources. For some subjects, timeliness or currency of the information is critical. In science and medicine, for example, it's really important that the most recent information be retrieved. In history or literature, currency may not be as important. Frequently, your professor will place a time limit on your assignments, and this will help guide you. For this class, important to your final project, your annotated bibliography, currency is considered 5 years for medical or cutting-edge science and 10 years for everything else. Most search engines and library-based databases will allow you to specify a time frame to search. And I say 5 years for medical research because things are just turning around so fast in that area. I think discoveries are being made all the time. Something 10 years old might be totally irrelevant. You know, they've come up with a cure for it by that time, and just things change so fast. And I consider 10 years for other sources, unless you need something that's more than 10 years old, and you would be able to prove that in your annotated bibliography. You can say, I'm doing a historical perspective, I really needed to know the background of this, and I believe that this source is important for me even though it's older. And the thing to do when you're proving that is that it's the best article of that era. If there's newer and better information, you do not want to use that. Okay, that is the end of lesson 1. You've got 2 assignments for this lesson. One is a short quiz, 5 points, and the second one is your research keyword worksheet. In this course in e-learning, there are 2 copies of the research keyword worksheet. There's a PDF and a Word document. So you have multiple choices. You can download the PDF and use a PDF editor if you have one. The ones online aren't really good, and usually they cost money. So unless you're at the library or the computer lab or something like that, I wouldn't recommend that. You can also print out the PDF, fill it in by hand, and scan it back into your computer and drop it in the Dropbox. There is a Word version that has blanks in it. That one's a little trickier to use, but you can just type in the boxes that are presented there. These right here, they are little text boxes for you to type in. So you are going to write your topic or thesis and pull out the important words, circling them. Then you're going to bring them down here, and you might only have 2, as I said, or you might want to kind of expand into another box over there. And then you're going to brainstorm possible synonyms and stuff like that to go in these boxes. And you can kind of see how the Boolean operators put them together on the side here. Step 3 is creating your search string, and you're going to use one example of truncation, one example of phrase searching. You might not do that in your search coming up, but I want you to do it for this worksheet. Make sure you have one example of each so I know you understand both. If you're using the Word version, you are going to delete keyword and put your own words in here. So I would have global warming in quotes, or climate change in quotes, or greenhouse effect in quotes. I would delete these little synonym things. They're just placeholders, and put my own words in. If you are filling it out by hand or in a PDF editor, you need to white out those between the ors and fill in your own words there. Make sure you do that. The last sentence says type this phrase into a search engine like JSTOR or Academic Search Complete. You do not have to do that for this exercise because we have not learned how to use the databases yet. If you want to give it a go, go ahead, but you are not required to. This assignment is worth 10 points.